Queen Elizabeth I wasn't just a monarch, she was a living legend. She called herself the Virgin Queen, wore extravagant gowns covered in jewels, and ruled with a brilliant mind and an iron will. History remembers her for her dazzling court, the defeat of the Spanish Armada, and for transforming England into a powerful Protestant nation. But behind the glamour and strength, beneath the layers of makeup and strings of pearls, was a woman driven by fear, pride, and obsession. She was deeply concerned with how others saw her. And when it came to personal cleanliness, things took a strange turn. In Elizabeth's time, hygiene wasn't about health, it was about appearance. And the Queen turned cleanliness into a carefully staged performance. She believed that water could make her ill and feared aging so much that she treated her body almost like a sacred object, untouchable by time, and even by soap. In this video, we'll uncover 5 of the weirdest and most shocking ways Queen Elizabeth I tried to stay clean. And trust us, the last one will truly surprise you. Elizabeth had a powerful addiction: sugar. At the time, sugar wasn't just a treat, it was a rare luxury. Imported from distant lands, it was so expensive that most people would go their entire lives without ever tasting it. But for the Queen of England, it was everywhere. She didn't just enjoy sweet things, she reveled in them. Her royal feasts overflowed with candied violets, sugar-dusted fruits, sweet almond marzipan, and syrup-soaked desserts. Sugar wasn't just a craving, it was a symbol. To indulge in it so freely was to flaunt wealth, status, and England's growing influence on the world stage. Elizabeth didn't just consume sugar, she weaponized it as royal image. But beneath the sweetness was a bitter truth. Dental care in the 1500s was practically non-existent. Toothbrushes were crude, often made from twigs or cloth, and some people scrubbed with crushed eggshells. Elizabeth, on the other hand, had her own special concoction: a homemade toothpaste made from herbs and sugar. Yes, sugar. The very thing rotting her teeth was part of her cleaning routine. To make matters worse, she also used abrasive powders that scraped away her enamel, speeding up the damage. Over time, her regal smile deteriorated into something grotesque. By the 1590s, foreign ambassadors were commenting on it. Her teeth were blackened, cracked, or missing altogether. Herbalist John Gerard claimed her breath was so foul it made conversation unpleasant. Some even said her speech was hard to follow because of how many teeth she'd lost. Still, she refused to have them removed. Elizabeth was famously stubborn and terrified of pain. In one legendary attempt to convince her, a courtier had a tooth pulled right in front of her to prove it wouldn't kill her. You've probably heard the famous and slightly horrifying quote, "I bathe once a month, whether I need it or not." Some claim Queen Elizabeth I actually said it. Others believe it's just legend. But true or not, the quote captures how people in the 1500s viewed hygiene, very differently from today. Back then, water wasn't seen as cleansing, it was considered dangerous. Many believed it could spread illness, weaken the body, or allow in bad air, known as miasma, an invisible poison blamed for deadly diseases like the plague. So instead of promoting health, bathing was thought to invite harm. Elizabeth took that belief to heart. Rather than washing with soap and water, she followed a very different routine. Instead of scrubbing, she changed her linen underclothes, called shifts, multiple times a day. People believed the fine, soft fabric could absorb sweat, dirt, and toxins from the skin. No water required, just fresh linen. When she did refresh herself, she used rose water, vinegar, or special herbal infusions prepared by her royal apothecaries. These were gently dabbed onto her skin by handmaids in a slow, deliberate ritual. It wasn't about hygiene, it was about presentation. Her body was treated less like a human form and more like a sacred object, something to be preserved, protected, and admired. So why not just take a proper bath? Because that wasn't simple. Her palaces had no plumbing, no running water. A bath meant hauling out a huge wooden tub, heating dozens of buckets of water, and summoning several servants to carry, pour, and assist. It was closer to staging a royal event than doing a quick wash. Bathing was a spectacle, a luxury, not a routine. And yet, Elizabeth was still considered clean by the standards of her time. She wore hundreds of gowns made from the finest silks and velvets. She smelled of flowers and herbs, kept perfumed gloves and scented handkerchiefs, and demanded that every part of her appearance be pristine. Queen Elizabeth I's face is one of the most iconic in history, pale as porcelain, smooth as marble, and cold as stone. But that wasn't her real skin. It was a carefully painted mask, worn not for beauty, but for power. In her era, pale skin symbolized wealth, status, and even divine favor. The whiter you were, the higher you stood in society. Elizabeth didn't just embrace this standard, she embodied it. Her makeup wasn't just cosmetic, it was political. It was myth-making. Her go-to product was Venetian ceruse, a lethal blend of white lead and vinegar. It gave her a flawless, glowing appearance, hiding every scar and imperfection. But beneath the surface, it was destroying her skin, causing rashes, sores, and long-lasting damage. As her real face broke down, she simply added more layers, turning her appearance into something rigid and mask-like. And it didn't end there. For her lips, she used vivid red pigments made from mercury, one of the deadliest substances on Earth. Over time, it took a toll. Trembling hands, memory loss, mood swings, classic signs of mercury poisoning. Yet Elizabeth had no idea she was poisoning herself every time she got ready for court. Why keep doing it? Because her face wasn't just hers, it was the face of a kingdom. Her image was her authority. It made her seem timeless, divine, beyond human. She forbade artists from painting her true likeness. Instead, official portraits were based on idealized templates from her younger years. No matter how old she grew, her image stayed the same, perfect, eternal. She even avoided natural light, preferring the shadows of candlelit rooms where flaws could hide. In her later years, her makeup was said to be so thick and brittle that a single touch could crack it. She rarely washed her face. Why would she? Washing meant removing the illusion and revealing a vulnerable, aging woman behind the legend of the Virgin Queen. Did she know the makeup was killing her? Historians still debate it. But one thing is certain, Elizabeth chose the mask over her health. To preserve her myth, she was willing to sacrifice her body. Because for her, power meant perfection, and perfection at all costs. To truly understand Queen Elizabeth I's hygiene, you have to understand her greatest fear, losing control. Every inch of her body, her painted face, perfumed gloves, and carefully chosen scents wasn't just about appearance. It was about power, about masking vulnerability. In her time, bathing wasn't common, it was risky. People believed water could carry disease or let in bad air. But it wasn't just about health. Bathing meant baring the body, both physically and symbolically. And Elizabeth, who had seen her mother and Bullen destroyed by the court, refused to appear exposed or fragile. To her, a naked body was a vulnerable body. So, she avoided water and created her own version of cleanliness, one built on perfume and ritual. Every day, she surrounded herself with layers of sweet, powerful scents. Her maids applied rose water, lavender oil, vinegar washes, and herbal infusions, brewed in the palace still rooms, not to cleanse, but to mask. A few dabs behind the ears, a touch to the wrists, a scented handkerchief tucked into her sleeve, and she drifted through court like a garden in bloom, untouched by anything human. She carried pomanders, small, ornate balls filled with herbs and resins, hidden in her gown or hanging from her belt. When foul odors crept near, she'd raise one to her nose, inhaling the controlled world she'd built. These weren't just for comfort. They sent a message: I am not like you. I do not stink like the rest of the world. Even her clothing was part of the illusion. Her gloves were perfumed, her handkerchiefs soaked in oils, and her stiff, layered dresses were designed to conceal the body and trap scent. She famously gifted scented gloves to courtiers, not from her skin, but from her image. As for her hair, it was rarely washed. Washing was considered risky, especially for someone who wore heavy makeup. Instead, her natural hair was stiffened with sugar water and egg whites, then powdered. As she aged and began to lose hair, likely due to years of lead and mercury exposure, she turned to auburn wigs to maintain the illusion of youth. But beneath the powder and perfume, Her body was falling apart. The toxic makeup had left her skin scarred, thin, and blistered. Rumors swirled of peeling skin, open sores, and a face too damaged to touch. Still, she continued to paint it on, thicker and thicker. She even banned mirrors from her private chambers. No one was allowed to see the truth, not even herself. It said she had a servant whose sole job was to powder her shoulders in secret, so her real skin would never be revealed. Elizabeth became a prisoner of her own illusion. She didn't skip bathing simply because it was inconvenient. She avoided it because washing meant wiping away the mask. To clean the body was to admit it was aging, cracking, human. And Elizabeth had spent her life convincing the world she was something more. In her final years, she carried a perfumed walking stick. When passing smelly courtiers, she'd raise it to her nose, not just to block the stench, but to remind everyone, I am the queen. I do not belong to your world. Her body was no longer just flesh and blood. It was the crown. It had to remain perfect, even if that perfection destroyed the woman beneath. To Elizabeth, cleanliness wasn't about health. It was about power. It was about staying untouchable,